Hi guys, Sez the Vet here. Today we're going to be talking about cross-grazing with different species and different age classes to keep your pasture health fantastic and those parasite burdens nice and low naturally. Stick around. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sez the Vet. I am Sez, your vet for the day. Today we're going to be talking about something that is done, unfortunately, really poorly a lot of the time. This is cross-grazing. Now this is a form of rotational grazing, so you will need to have multiple paddocks to make this process work. Cross-grazing of species, so between different species and between different age classes within a species, is a really effective way of maintaining awesome pasture health, as well as keeping parasite burdens really low. Parasite drench resistance is becoming a really big issue all around the world, and here in New Zealand we're not excluded from that. Unfortunately, goats tend to be the most prone, so I do see a lot of issues cropping up in goats. Now, drench resistance essentially just means that the parasites, the internal worms in your animals, are evolving quickly to outsmart the drenches that we have available to us. It's becoming more and more difficult to kill these internal worms. So I highly recommend following the channel, subscribe down below, check out my video on managing drench resistance as well. Okay, but here's how we cross-graze to naturally keep parasite burdens on the pasture low, avoiding unnecessary use of drenches. Now before I give you my Green Dream rotational plan, here are a few key concepts that we need to understand before jumping right in. So firstly, cross-grazing different species. Now the idea here is that different species of animal carry different types of worms inside them, but not every single species does this. So cattle and deer tend to carry their own species that are shared. Then sheep, goats and camelids share many worm species. And then horses carry different species again. So if you can alternate the species that you have, the species of stock that you have running through those paddocks, they're going to pick up each other's parasites, but the parasites will die inside the animal because it's not where that parasite wants to be. So in doing so, we can dramatically decrease parasite burdens inside the animal and on the pasture. But let me repeat that again. Sheep, goats and camelids carry the same species. They share many of the same worm species. Running sheep, goats and alpaca, for example, together is not cross-grazing. You are amplifying the parasite problem for those animals. Now remember that our highest risk animals are anyone under 18 months old. As an animal gets older, at about 18 months old, they do tend to build up some resilience against carrying worms, with the exception of goats. Okay, these guys are high risk at any age. But generally, young stock under about a year and a half are the high risk animals. So you can actually cross-graze with different age classes of the same species as well. Does that make sense? So the older animals will pick up the worms, but the worms will just die or at least sit and do nothing inside the grown-up animals. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. With these concepts in place, here's how we do it, our bullet points. Number 1, graze your young animals ahead of the older stock. 90% of parasite larvae, of the baby parasites, are sitting in the bottom 3 centimetres of the grass. So if you allow your young animals, for example your calves or your weaned growing lambs, if you allow the young animals to eat the long, high energy, low parasite pasture first, then bring in your adult cattle, the grown-up cows and the grown-up sheep behind the youngsters, to clean up the shorter grass that is carrying most of the parasites. Okay, that's what you want to do. So the long ones get, the young animals get the long, low risk pasture, then the adult animals come in behind them and eat the shorter stuff. Number 2, pre-graze your paddock with a different species of stock before putting your young stock in. So adult cattle can prepare a nice safe pasture for your growing lambs, or adult sheep can prepare a nice safe pasture for your growing calves. Okay, now again, remember sheep, goats and alpaca and llama share many of the same parasite species. So we do need the pasture to be grazed by a different species group for at least 4 weeks before putting your high risk young stock in. Number 3, avoid carrying your young stock through to weaning on the same pasture year after year, okay? We see a lot of issues with using the same lambing paddocks over and over, season after season, where those lambs are growing up on that paddock, being carried through to weaning, sent off, and then brand new babies come on, okay? And we're just going to have those little baby animals just pumping out parasites like little parasite machines, okay? We need to have a different species of stock or an adult resistant age group cleaning up those paddocks in between. Right, number 4. Finally, remember that the worm burden is going to largely depend on how many animals we're grazing on that particular area of land. We call this stocking density. And the first thing you can do to reduce the number of parasites is to keep stocking rates low, decrease the number of animals on that land. And lo and behold, you have less parasite larvae coming out the back end and contaminating that pasture, and on the same token, those animals are going to have longer grass to be eating, so they're going to be taking in less of the parasites as well. So, my green dream of a rotational system, you would have your goats coming through first, eating the long, low parasite pasture and tidying up the weeds. A goat's diet is only naturally made up of 20% pasture. The majority is weeds up off the ground, so of course, be careful of toxic plants. Unfortunately, goats are not too picky. It makes them great weed whackers, but they're also high risk of eating toxic plants. So you'd have your goats come through first, okay? They're happy places, 7-8 centimetres up off the ground. After your goats, bring your cattle through. Now, they like to eat grass by wrapping their tongues around the sward, around the mouthful, and pulling. They like to eat the longer grass, so move them out when the grass height gets down to about 5-6 centimetres. And then you bring your sheep through, so they nibble with their front teeth and like to eat closer to the ground. Now there's a bit of variation here depending on season and how lush or nutrient dense the grass is, but generally any shorter than 3 centimetres and a mouthful for a sheep is restricted, and parasites are high once you're below 3 centimetres as well. So if you're grazing lower than 3 centimetres, they better not be any young animals under 18 months old, or any sheep in late pregnancy or lactating ewes raising babies as well should not be eating below 3 centimetres. Okay, so from there you can then run through your pigs to turn things over if you're going to resow the paddock, or just straight to your chooks. Chickens are going to scratch around, spread around the dung piles, fertilise the ground beautifully for you with their own ammonia droppings, and you've got your natural fertiliser there. And then once you've had all of your species go through, you spell the paddock, so rest the paddock, let the grass regenerate, and restart. Now just remember, when evaluating pasture length, dung piles or patchy weeds are not going to be eaten down. So don't take these patches into account when looking at average pasture length, okay? Those do not count. The animals aren't going to eat them. We actually call that pasture sick or pasture ill. Alright, so we're going to leave it there for today. Good luck. I know that was a pretty info heavy session, so go ahead and ask questions down below if you need some clarification. Restore your land to a natural utopia, cut back on the drenches when they're not needed, and hopefully we can get many more happy years for our animals, still being able to use our drenches. Okay guys, I'll talk to you later. If that was helpful for you, go ahead and thumbs up, share the video if you know anyone else on your farms or lifestyle blocks that would find that useful. Education is key, and subscribe down below, ask your questions. I'll jump on and try and answer any that I can over the next few days. Okay, all the best. Bye bye.